Sure.
All right, here we go. So day 4 of the Automation Studio Bootcamp. We're going to be going over those SQL essentials for Marketing Cloud. Thank you all for joining. Let's just take a look at the upcoming sessions. On Thursday, we've got a session on all those cool ways to send emails in Automation Studio. We've got a break for next week, and then we're coming back with a couple more sessions to round out the series before the end of the year. We also have our hands-on sessions that happen every Wednesday. Tomorrow's session, you'll be building the ETL from scratch. The following week, we've got a guest instructor, Maggie Ellis, who's going to be doing automation-fed journey end-to-end from scratch. So if you're interested in those hands-on sessions, just add your email to the chat. You will be given access to Marketing Cloud to build right in the platform live with expert builders. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to be going over today. We're going to be going over SQL. We're going to give a little bit of an overview of why SQL. We're going to be going over the basics of SQL. Then we're going to be breaking down those functions in the key areas of any SQL query, the select, from, and where. We've got 2 use cases to build in the platform, and then we'll always end it up with those 5 tips. So let's talk about SQL and Marketing Cloud. It's a little bit different. So than your typical SQL, which we'll go into a little bit more detail. But why should you care about SQL? For those, my perspective, it is the #1 language to know in Marketing Cloud. AMP script is also fantastic. It's a close second. Server-side JavaScript can also be very helpful. But the real foundation of Marketing Cloud is based on SQL. It really gives you the ability to peek under the hood on your data. It also opens up all those different data stores, right? You can take a look at those data extensions. Like we're going to be going over today, you can dig into those data views, custom attributes. It gives you a lot of more flexibility, opens up your data set. It's fantastic for troubleshooting. So you don't just need it to set up those segments and fire journeys and all of that. You can use it to populate, like, what's this field looking like? What's if you have a problem with your data, you can go use SQL to sort of troubleshoot that. It is a fantastic tool for that. It is heavily used in other Salesforce platforms like Core and Data Cloud. So being comfortable with SQL and Marketing Cloud, you'll be using those skills in other parts of Salesforce. So definitely worth the investment. And it's also, used across many platforms. It is a standard language. You'll definitely, find that it's useful, digging in if you're new to SQL altogether. And, it's a little bit nerdy, but it's also kind of cool because it really gets you to visualize your data, as you'll see today. So let's talk a little bit more about what's different about SQL in Marketing Cloud. So it's based on SQL Server 2019. It's not all SQL code is supported. So when you're looking for resources, when you're troubleshooting your queries in Marketing Cloud, you can certainly go and search, like W3 schools or generic SQL coding, but just keep it in mind that it may not, that functions, that syntax may not work in Marketing Cloud. Your first step probably is to go within the smaller community within Marketing Cloud of people who are using SQL in Marketing Cloud specifically. Query Studio, I know we've talked about this many times in many of these sessions. It's a free tool. It's offered by Salesforce. We are going to be using it today. Definitely get Query Studio. It is a game changer, as you will see today. Marketing Cloud will also auto kill your query if it exceeds 30 minutes. So as you're building those queries and you're working through your data, make sure that you are timing that accordingly. If your query is a little bit too complex and it's getting toward that 30-minute mark, you may need to create a second query or figure out the data, separate that a little bit. Error messaging is limited. And we'll try to see if we can get a couple errors today, but you have the community, like Matthias is a great resource, which I've got a link right down here below, that you can share in the community when you've got these errors, and the community will help you work through that problem, work through all those different error messages. Definitely check out Matthew Dabrowski's SQL Basics. It is fantastic. It sort of walks you through these 5 different exercises of how to get up to speed in SQL. I've got a sort of a version of that today a little bit. Definitely his documentation I go back to all the time. It's like the AMP script guide, but for SQL. Highly recommend it. And then if you're starting out with SQL, start slow. Don't build these crazy functions and long SQL coding. If you're just starting out, build it slowly. Add those functions only if you've used them before, or if you're familiar with them. If you're adding any of that new functionality, make sure you really test it through and take your time in building it. That way you're building a solid foundation in your coding. Okay, let's talk about the basics of SQL. So as we'll be going through today, any SQL query has 3 sections. There's a select, a from, and a where. So the select is a list of those fields that you're going to be writing to a data extension. The from is where you're getting your data from, all the different data extensions you're pulling your data, how you're connecting to that data. And then the where are those filters to target your data. So you don't want to pull in all of those records. You want to filter to specific audiences. That's where you're going to be using that where statement. So I've listed some of the top basic functions in each of these areas. We'll go over those pretty quickly in this deck, and then we're going to try to use all of them in the 2 use case builds that we're going to build today as well. Let's quickly go over those select statement functions. The one that will, some of the more complex functionality are the count, the max, min, case, top. All of that functionality is probably a little bit more on the advanced side. Typically, there isn't a lot of, you don't use a lot of functions in the select statement. You're just outputting fields. The most basic function is the as, where you can use it. You'll see that today. Use it to transform your data point that you are pulling in to the one that you want to write to. Count gives you an ability, you'll see that today, to count the number of rows. Case is like an if-then statement, where you go through and say, if this value equals this, then write this value. Can be very helpful. Max, min, you're going to be using that, we'll be using that today in a group by to return to either the smallest or the largest value, the most alphabetically, earliest in the alphabet, latest in the alphabet if it's a text field. And then a top function just gives you an ability to return an X amount of records. Sometimes that's helpful, especially if your query is running to 30 minutes. So we'll be covering the first 4 of those. We may not get to top today. Let's talk about the from statement. The most important part of the from are the joins. You might have seen this, this diagram. There are a bunch of these query cheat sheets out there. This is an incredibly helpful diagram that outlines the differences between all those different joins. So there's, the regular join, most people call it like an inner join. There's the left join, there's the right join, and then there's an outer join. There's a lot of joins here. We're going to cover 3 top joins. So the inner join, which is this one here in the center, is when you've got 2 data sets and you want to only find the data that it matches a certain record between both of those databases. All those other records that don't match in either A or B, you don't want. You just want the ones that match. That's your typical join, creates that data set. You can now pull data from both of those records. The left join match would be this example, where you want to, it's like the join itself, but you also want to include all of your first data set. So you want to join the records that match, but in case those records don't match on your first data set, you want to keep them as well. And then the last join is when you're using it sort of like as a dedupe, where you're adding another date extension that you want to join, but instead of finding those fields that match, you want to, remove all of B from A. You want to find those fields that match on, that are in A and B, and you want to exclude them from A. You can use that as sort of a dedupe functionality. We'll be going over a couple of these different joins today, but this is the most important part of the from statement, is understanding those joins. And again, in the complexity, definitely take your time on the joins, really understand them before you add them, because your queries can be completely off in the wrong direction if you're not using those joins correctly. In the where clause, these are some of the functions. We'll be actually using most of these today. This gives you an ability to really filter that data. So we'll be using something like, the date add today, which gives you an ability to adds that interval of a range of time and returns a date. So this will be used today as we want to filter. We want to bring in records only from a certain time period. The get date function, that's part of the same statement for the date add, that returns the current time frame, the current time in your database. So that gives you an ability as you're automating this functionality for it to always pull in the current time, whether that runs today or at 8 a.m. or at 12 p.m. In statement gives you ability to add multiple values. So instead of just saying X value needs to equal a certain value, you can have a string, a variety of different values. It's very helpful to use the in statement. The group by function, we'll be walking through this today. This groups rows that have the same value, sort of helps with deduping or summarizing records. And then order by orders those rows in ascending or descending orders. Typically your core set of functions that you're going to be using in SQL queries. Probably these three are the big ones, group by depending on the functionality you're looking for. And then one more that's commonly used is the like statement. I wanted to break this out in a separate slide just because there's a lot of different iterations of the like. So that gives you an ability to sort of more advanced, in statement or an equal statement. Gives you an ability to find those records that have something, familiar that you're looking for. So in the example, these are three examples of how you could use a like statement. So 003, here's an example where you want to find all records that begin with 003. So you can go down to this like chart and you can say, I want any values that start with A. And so the syntax for that is like, single quote, what you're looking for is a value and the % sign and a single quote. Same thing for, you want this, any value that ends in a certain syntax. Like in this example, we want to find all records that end with the domain of cervello.com. So that's how you would use that single quote % and then the variable that you're looking for, the text that you're looking for, and then a single quote. And then the last one, I got a typo here. It should be single quote % banking %. You can see it down here using this, this scenario where you want to find in that field any record that has within the field in any position a specific word. So you can use that syntax there. So different ways you can use like. We'll be showing a couple of those examples today. Okay, let's get into our use cases. We're going to go right into the Marketing Cloud platform and build these queries from scratch. So our first scenario is we want to build a lead nurture journey where we're pulling in leads from Salesforce and we want to feed them into a journey, populate certain values, some basic syntax, basic variables like subscriber key, email address, and maybe name to personalize it. Bonus, we want to prevent leads from entering twice. So we want to dedupe our logic against maybe the data extension of the journey itself, so to prevent them coming in. And then extra bonus, we want to populate a super hot lead field if we can, depending on criteria in both the lead and the account. Our second use case is engagement reporting. We want to view engagement, in this example, clicks across subscribers. We want to take a look at all of the engagement for a particular time frame, or in this example, maybe an email address, excuse me, an email send or a journey. We want to view that in a query itself. And then our bonus is, can we get a count of that specific engagement or a click for each subscriber, or maybe for the entire email. But we want to find only those clicks for those that have clicked on a specific button on the email itself. So we want to get very specific on that. So that's our bonus there. All right, so let's go into Marketing Cloud. And let's just navigate to Query Studio. So we're going to be spending all of our time today in Query Studio. We're not going to go and create traditional queries. It's just easier to play around in Query Studio. We'll at the end show you how to create, take those queries and just create an actual SQL query. But the Query Studio gives you the ability to play with all that data. So we're going to go, if you do install Query Studio, it'll be under your App Exchange button. You just click on Query Studio and it takes you in there. It gives you a blank canvas to work from. One of the tips that we recommend doing, which can help you whenever you're building queries, we won't do it today, but typically a best practice is if you create we have this in Confluence, a document where every time you create a query, you just paste it into this document. And so whenever you're looking to use a particular data view or a data extension or an object, you can just do a Control F and find a query that you might have used in the past. You can copy that query and paste it in, and you can start with a starter query. So definitely recommended to do that. That can save you a lot of time and energy. Okay, so starting out building any query, I typically just like to just start out with the 3 sections, just to break it down. Okay, select from where. And the first place where we're going to start from is the from. Where are we getting this data from? Now we want to pull in leads from Salesforce. So we want to use a synchronized data extension. So to do that, we're going to go over to Contact Builder. We're going to go to the synchronized data extension library. We've got this set up with the Marketing Cloud Connect. So we have these data extensions already synced over. So it should be pretty straightforward to pull that in. So if we go under our synchronized data extensions, we want to find the lead synchronized data extension. So we're going to click on lead. And we're just going to copy that syntax for that data extension and paste it here into our from statement. If you have data extensions that have spaces, you'll need to use a square brackets to do that. But if you follow best practices of always naming your data extensions with underscores instead of spaces, you won't need to have those square brackets. So we're going to use the as function to use and be able to use this letter L for any of those fields that we want to populate in our select statement. So let's start with something really simple, and let's just output 3 variables from this data extension that we need to send an email. So the first variable is a subscriber key, because that's we're going to be using a subscriber key. And if we go into our data extension in Marketing Cloud, we want to use the field that has that lead ID from Salesforce as that subscriber key. So you can see this 00Q number. Start with that looks right. So we're going to use that ID field. So even though it's kind of makes no sense, I typically just like to go back to the properties go back over here and just paste in that ID. Now, we want to name this, since we like in Marketing Cloud calling that subscriber key, we want to name that using the as function. So that's how this will be populated in the data extension as subscriber key. Another tip that I was taught that's very helpful is when you're creating a number of rows in a number of fields in your select statement, in the second field that you populate, start it with a comma. So every field that you add always starts with a comma. That way you never forget. Typically, if you typically want to do that, end it with a comma for every field. But if you always start the second field with a comma, you'll never end up forgetting to add that comma at the end, and it just sort of stops, prevents errors, getting those common errors. Okay, now we need email address, so we're going to pull in email. And let's paste that in there. And I like to call that email address in Marketing Cloud as well. And then last but not least, let's just pull in that first name. So let's go back into our records and see what we've got here for values. So first name looks like the field. So we're just going to scroll down and copy that field and paste it in here. And we'll keep that as first name, that's fine. Okay, so now we've got our basic select that of the fields that we want to output. Now let's go to our where, which we don't want to pull in all of these fields. We only want to pull in, say, those leads that may have gotten created in the last 24 hours. Say we're feeding them into a lead nurture journey. So there should be a created date field on the lead object. So let's see. There it is, created date. So let's bring that over to our query. Now we want to, because I forgot to do this, because we're doing all of these on the lead, we're going to do an L dot in front of all these variables. Now, you don't need this if you're just doing a single join, but we are going to be joining in a couple of records in here, a couple of different databases. So it's always good to make sure that you're putting those L dots in front of it. Okay, and now we want to use the date add function. We want to use a function that says, I want to create a date that is within the last 24 hours. So to do that, we're going to do a greater than or equals to. We're going to pull in that date add function. Now that date add function has a couple of fields, variables in the function itself. The first field is the time frame of how long you want to be this interval of time. So we're going to use day. You can use month. You can use hour. You can use quarter. There's a lot of flexibility in there. And then the next variable is how many days you want to look for the function to look at. Now, in this example, we want to use anybody who's had a created date within the last 24 hours. So that's why we want to do a -1. That's sometimes confusing there, but that's why we want, from 1 day ago, we want this date and time where this create date is greater than 1 day ago. And then to get the date currently, we're going to want to use that get date function, which is going to give you that, the current date and time right now. It's going to say, okay, I want to return a date from this minute in time 24 hours ago. And that's what we're going to use as a way to, to validate that as a point in time. So let's just hit run on this and see if we get any errors. So hopefully this should pull over a couple of records. Now I've added a couple of leads within the 24 hours. So they should be sitting in that date extension. And here we go. Here are four records. So relatively straightforward functionality. It's got those 3 fields. It's got everything that we need here to send that email. And if we wanted to, we could even also populate that create date just to see that point in time. But we'll hold on that for right now because we're going to go on to our next phase, our next bonus. So our next bonus was, let's just go back to our slide. And we want to prevent leads from entering in twice. So let's go back into our query. Now, this data extension that we're going to be ultimately creating is going to be fed into a journey itself. So we've got a journey set up where we're going to feed them into, a standard communication, multi-email communication, and we've got a specific data extension here that will feed those leads in on a daily basis. So what we want to do is we want to, we only want these leads to enter in this journey once. Now, you can use settings in your journey to prevent them from entering once, but sometimes you may need that setting to be working in both the query and the journey itself. So we want to build in that functionality to say, okay, we want to pull in any lead that has been created in the last 24 hours, just as long as they're not in this data extension. So to do that, we want to find that data extension. So here's this data extension, and we want to copy its name. And we're going to bring this in. It's going to add it to our join state as a join. But we don't know what type of join we're going to do here, so we're just going to use join for right now. We're going to paste this in. Now we're going to name this as AC for like abandoned cart. Say that's what our program is. Now we need to do an on statement, which is going to determine how these two databases are talking together. So in the data extension that we have, we are pulling in that subscriber key, right? So if we take a look at the records itself, you can see that they should be, they're either 00Q numbers or 003. They're IDs coming from Salesforce. So now that we know that subscriber key is a Salesforce ID, and then we know that the lead has an ID as well, we can match on that. So we're going to take that on statement is going to be L.ID, the ID from that lead equals the AC dot, and we're going to just take the subscriber key because that was the same syntax on that data extension. So that's how we connect these two databases so that they can talk and we can figure out what's going to be the right way to do this join. Okay, and so now what we want to do is to figure out the appropriate type of join to make this work. Again, we don't want any of the records in the abandoned cart data extension. We want to exclude them from this data set because we want to prevent them from entering in the journey twice. So if we go back to our query cheat sheet, and let me just zoom in a little bit on this. So we want to figure out which one of these joins works for our scenario. And so like we talked about before, this is the join we're looking for. Again, we want all of those leads that have just had that created date within the last 24 hours, except if they're in that data extension, we don't want them. We want to exclude them. So these charts can be very helpful because we're going to literally follow the syntax on this chart. So you can see we've got from table A, that's our lead data extension. And then this is telling us we want to do a left join from that table B, which is that abandoned cart data extension. So that's important. You can see they're matching those two fields there, sort of like what we were doing. And then another important part is that in our where statement, we want that B key or that B subscriber key is null. That's the important part. We want it, meaning that we want that field when you're querying this, that it doesn't exist. So that if it does exist, we want to exclude it. So let's go back into our query and we're going to make that change. And we're going to make this a left join. And then in our where clause, we want to do an and statement. We're adding an additional filter. And then we want to have this a.subscriber key is null. Okay, so before we run this, let's just take a look at this data. So I just want to take a quick screen capture of these subscriber keys, and we can just compare them to this data, sort of spot check it. So if we go back to our data extension, and if I bring over this data, let me just zoom in a little bit on this. Okay, so if we look side by side here, you can see of these last 3 records, this 6JR MAC, here's that 6JR MAC, we've got a JM MAC, JM MAC, and we've got a JW MAC. So these 3 records that we're pulling into our query now are in this data extension. They've been sent through this journey before. So hopefully when we run this query, we should only see the K1 MAC should be the only record that's left. So we want to spot check to make sure this is right. So let's run that query and see what we get for a result. Right, Prasad, the left exclusion join, right? So this is a handy tool to use when you want to exclude a certain subset of records from your main database that you're creating. Any questions while we're waiting for Query Studio to run? Sometimes when you add additional joins, it can take a little bit longer, but shouldn't take too much time. Okay, there it is. K1 Mac, right? The only subscriber that's left there. And I just even named it, you know, not dedupe, so it should work post dedupe. So there you go. There's a way to use, again, we just added the join statement. We've now you can see the relationship of whys. We use the as statement to link these 2 databases. We know which fields we're pulling it from. And then also different ways to use joins for that functionality. Okay, one last thing we want to use is we want to output a field that designates a super hot lead in the lead and also the account as well. So we're going to do a little bit of account-based marketing fanciness here. What we want to do is we want to add the account synchronized data extension so that we can also, we're going to want to bring in this ranking score from the lead itself, from the lead object, and also from the account. And then we want to build in logic that says if the lead score is hot and if the account score is also hot, we want to output a value that says this is a super hot lead. Any other scenario, we want to only output, you know, a regular lead. So what we're going to want to do is let's first of all, we're going to get rid of this join just because we want to pull up all of these records again. So we'll go back to this query as it is. And then before we leave the lead object, I want to add one more field, which is the ranking field on the lead itself. So we've got this field called a predictive score. We're going to bring that over and let's just paste that in here. Perfect. All right, and now we want to add in another data extension, which is the account. So we want to match the leads to an account so that we can say, okay, for this lead, we know the lead ranking, but for the account that they're on, what is that account ranking? So we're going to pull in the account synchronized data extension. That's going to be another database we're going to add to our from statement. So now for this example, we only want to pull in those records that that exist in both that are a lead, and then they also have an account assigned to it. Say maybe that's a requirement in our use case where an account must be assigned on the lead. Typically it's assigned when you convert the lead to a contact, but in this example, we'll just go with that way. Okay, so now we need to figure out our on statement, how we're going to be able to connect these 2 records. And you know, it's a little bit of a simple example for this use case. We typically like to do an ID by ID match. But for this example, we're going to use the company field on the lead. And that's going to match the name on the on the account. So we'll do company, L company equals A, and then let's just go back to that account synchronized data extension, and let's just find the name of that account, which should be name. Okay, so we're gonna add that there. And then now that we've got that connected, we're gonna be able to output, let's output that ranking field on the account, which is the account, the ABM tier __C. So that we'll get that outputted. Okay, so let's just run this and see if now that we've successfully joined these two databases together, we should be able to see however many records get populated. We should be able to see the predictive score, which is the lead score. And then this is the account score as well. So again, pulling data from two different data sources and displaying that. So now we want to build in logic that will say, okay, if somebody has, a lead has a hot predictive score and they have a tier 1 hot score, we want to output a special field for sales that says this is a super hot lead. If neither of those criteria are met, it's going to say a normal lead. So we're going to use a case statement for this, and we're going to go right to the source, Matthews Dabrowski, on how to use case statements. So he's got an incredible amount of documentation on all of these amazing functions. So we're going to focus just on the case itself. And we wanted to find an example where we are comparing two different values within a case statement. So he's got a good example here. So your syntax is you start with a comma and then it's a case. And then we're going to do it in here where this is a nested case statement, where we're going to say if, which is basically the when, value equals hot and second value equals tier 1 hot, then we're going to want to output this value. And then I think further up here in his syntax, he's got an else statement as well. So we're going to use both of these examples to fill out this case statement. So let's go here and we're going to fill out their case statement. So it's good probably to indent it a little bit. So when the L predictive score equals hot, and then we're going to do and the ABM tier equals, so that one is tier 1 hot, then we're going to say super hot lead. And then right below the when, we're going to do an else, and then we're just going to say normal lead. And then let's just go back to his syntax real quick, just to see how this ends. So we're doing the appropriate syntax. And it's just end, and then this is the name of the field that you want this at. So relatively straightforward. So we're just going to do, or maybe we'll just back this up, and we'll do an end as, let's say, Uber ranking. Okay. Let's see if we get any errors there, if we run that and see what we can output. So using that case statement, super fun way to use it, sort of like an if-then statement to qualify and check different records depending on how they're outputting. And then, if this works, kind of a fun way to output a new variable, create a new variable just in the select statement itself. It's not coming from this data set, it's based on these data sets. So here we go, here's that Uber ranking, and just spot checking it, yep, that works. So hot, tier 1 hot, super hot lead, this one also qualifies, these don't, so they're normal leads. So there's a way to use the case statement. Definitely refer back to Matthews's documentation for any other scenarios of different types of using case statements. But there's a fun way there. Okay, we're going to move on to our next use case. I know we're running out of time, so I'll try to speed this up a little bit. we're going to go to our next query. So our next use case is we want to output engagement for our, just general engagement, clicks or emails in our system. So we're going to do something pretty basic to start here. So what we want to do is leverage the data views that have all this engagement data. And there's a whole library of these different data views that are available. So one of those data views is click data view. So we'll be able to identify all the different clicks that have happened in your system. So this will be our primary focus will be using this click data view. And then we also want to use the job data view as well, as that can be helpful. It also provides information that can be helpful when you're doing data view work as well. So let's start off with the job data view and add this to our query. This will be our first data in our query. So we're going to do this from underscore job. We are going to call this J. And then let's join the click data view as well to this so that we can, combine both of these data stores. So we're just going to navigate down to the click data view and just copy the syntax that's available at the top. I think it's underscore click, but we'll just give it a second to do that. There we go. So we'll go into our query. We're going to join underscore click as C. And then the on statement. We need to figure out on click what is a way to unify these two databases. So if we go to click and we take a look at certain values, you can see there's a job ID right there on click. So let's go to job ID. And we know that's probably going to be what we want there on the click side. And then if we go back to job, obviously it has its job ID as well. So we'll do j.job ID equals click. Okay, fantastic. And now we just want to output certain fields that we're looking to get some data on, primarily from the click, but let's start from the job ID. So there's a variety of different data points here that can be very helpful. Let's just output the email name for now. Sometimes you'll want to use the email ID that can be helpful. So we want to use, again, we want to make sure we want to use a j.email name. We'll just leave it at that on the job. We won't get too complicated, but you'll probably want to add additional fields on there on the job side. All right, on the click side, let's take a look what we want to output there. So a subscriber key is going to be helpful to output so that we know which subscriber outputted there. So that's going to be c.subscriber key. We want probably good to put out that event date of when that that engaged upon. And let's see what else we got here. We could pull out the link name. That's going to give an idea of what that type of link is. Again, we're probably going to want to isolate a specific link name. That was part of our bonus effort. And then we probably want to do an is unique. We'll show why we want to include that when we run this data. There we go. All right, we'll go with that. And then for that, we're going to do that same syntax on our where clause, where it's that event date, and just say that for right now, we're just looking for engagement within the last 24 hours. So we're going to use that date add function, day -1, get date, and open paren. Perfect. All right, let's see if when we run this, we have some success. Okay, no errors. I'm batting 1,000 so far. Usually I forget a comma or forget an extra paren. Usually get a couple errors here. So hopefully this gives us a detail of the subscriber, when they engaged, the name of the email, whether it was unique or not. Okay, so here's that data again. This again an example why we want to use queries, because you can look into this back-end data right in Marketing Cloud. So we can see all of this engagement. We can see by those different subscriber keys. Now we can see the name of the link, which is going to be helpful. We can also see whether it's unique or not. So what we want to do so that's part one. Now what we want to do is we want to isolate those clicks that had a specific link name. Say it's go to cart is the link that we want. But before we do that, we want to remove all of those non-unique clicks so that we can isolate just the ones that were unique, right? As we know, some people will click multiple times when they click. And so we probably want to only use those clicks that are unique or don't want to overcount. So let's change that is unique. And to add that as a filter, is unique equals 1. That's populated there. Okay, and then with that populated, let's just quickly run that so that we can see our data. And then we can give us a visualization of a smaller data set that we want to get a count on from our data. Okay, so now we've got, now we sort of have a subset of that data. Now what we want to do is I want to output a count of those clickers who clicked on the go to cart call to action button versus those who clicked on privacy policy, right? If we're doing our reporting, we don't probably care so much about those who are clicking on our privacy policy. We want to, sort of put up that number of what's the number of those who clicked on an actual action item and that call to action. So to do this, we want to use the group by function. So we're going to use group by, and we want to get a count of all of those records that have that link name of go to cart. So what we want to do, we want to group it by the link name. Okay. And now in order to, and what we want to do on this is we can use the subscriber key as a count. So we're going to use the count function here. And just going to use that subscriber key just as a data point that's unique. And we're going to use that as, let's say it's click count, okay? And then if all other variables that are not what you're not grouping, you have to surround with a max function. So we're going to do a max here. We're just going to call this email name. And we are just going to remove this event date because we don't really need it for this use case. Link name is okay. And then we know this is unique. Well, we'll just add it in there. We'll just max it out. Okay, so fingers crossed, that should hopefully give us a count of all of each of these link names in engagement. Okay, so query field is valid, operating data bit is valid for max. Query field, operating data type field isn't valid for max type. Oh, it might be, this might not work for that Boolean. Okay, so here we go. There it is. There's our count. So that's interesting, that error, right? It doesn't look like the max function works for a Boolean. So that's good to know. And then here's our final, final report. Again, this is pretty simple. If you're, outputting thousands of records, a little bit more vigorous, but here's the output that says for all of the sends that we sent in the last 24 hours, this is the count of those number of clicks that actually clicked on that specific call to action. So there you go. There's an example of how to use the group by function, the count function, using data views. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview on that end. Let me just quickly wrap up. And now we're running out of time. Okay, let's talk about 5 tips. I think I've got 6 here. Install Query Studio, absolutely critical. Make a library of all your queries so that you can, point number 3, start with a starter query. Don't start from scratch like I did. Start from a certain point. Use the comma subscriber key or whatever the value is in your syntax on the select statement so you don't keep forgetting those commas. Know your joins. Take your time in really understanding those joins and really understand your code as well. And that's the session. I unfortunately have to jump for another meeting, so I apologize. Don't have time for any questions. Please ping the channel, the Slack channel if you have any questions, and enjoy Query Studio. We're going to be building this out in hands-on sessions the next couple of weeks, so feel free to join and build with us different queries. And thank you everybody for joining. Have a great day. Thanks everybody.
Yes, sir. And Justin.
Thank you.